We have dug ourselves into this hole by ignoring morality. This is why we're in the hole we're in.
I'm Delly Ogan, and I'm in conversation with the Reverend John Papworth, the author of this incredible book, Why Schools of Economics and Political Science Should Be Closed Down. John Papworth, welcome to this interview. Can I begin by asking you, what inspired you to write this book?
I was concerned with the moral attitude. I'm not a particularly moral person, but I do sense that if things in public life are going to go anywhere, they've got to have a fairly firm moral basis. And there's something profoundly immoral about the basis of our economic reasoning. And that's what prompted.
Some might say, what's morality got to do with economics?
Well, wasn't it Gandhi who said you can't have morality without community, and community launches you straight into political considerations about the size of the unit you're dealing with. At least that's how it comes over to me. But basically I think you have to accept that if you don't have a moral basis for anything so sweeping and penetrating as a general field of economic activity, you've got no basis at all. What is your basis otherwise?
Money, profits.
Yes.
That's what the people in the city will tell you.
Well, that may be an operating factor, and it may be one that gets things going, gets things moving in the sense of, let's say, investing, digging, planting, and all the rest of it. But ultimately, you're dealing not with a machine, feeding a machine. You're dealing with people operating in material terms, with material factors, for material result. But the end of the material result is ultimately a moral one. If it isn't, well, what is it for?
Reverend Papworth, people might say that, look, we're here now in the middle of a terrible recession, we're in a hole, and we need to dig ourselves out. And the last thing that we need is morality, the conservatism of morality, holding up the economic juggernauts. We need to get it going again.
Hang on a moment. We have dug ourselves into this hole by ignoring morality. This is why we're in the hole we're in. It's a hole of ultimate excess, ultimate forms of excess in terms of printing paper money, in terms of exploiting material resources, in terms of exploiting human labour. And somewhere along the line you have to ask yourself, why are you doing it? What is your overriding, impelling reason? And is making money a good enough reason for keeping a civilization going? Ask yourself that.
I mean, if the market is where people buy and sell, but the popular commentary that I hear is that the market has been, and you were talking about the market as if it's a person, it's an entity. It's just an aggregation of what people do, is it not? It's just human beings, ordinary human beings, making decisions.
Not entirely.
The invisible hand, is that not what it used to be called?
Well, you could have said that several hundred years ago. Whether you can say it today, I don't know at all. After all, it's in, 150 years ago. If you walk down the main high street of my village, it was full of local shops. And that was the market, where people were buying and selling. But what is instructive is that in the buying and selling, the money was changing hands at the local level between people actually living in the community,
Mm-hmm.
in that small local community. So their moral thinking had a pronounced impact on the general economic process.
Are you really suggesting that somebody went to the butchers, that was a moral exercise, the local butchers in your village? What's morality got to do with that? It just goes to the butchers and wants a piece of meat.
I think that the butcher had to sell meat in terms of certain qualities. It had to be of value. It had to be honest. It had to be decent. All these moral factors come into it always, all the time. And you can trace that in any form of economic activity. What you can't trace is a supreme moral factor operating once the market gets so big, so that people, for example, instead of buying in their local high street shop, are now taking motor cars to several miles away to a supermarket. You can't say that the supermarket is being run by any moral factors at all, except whatever is ordained by law. And increasingly, it's the people who control the market who are also controlling today the lawmaking process. And that's a very big factor. But look, I come back to this book I've written because it seems to me that what I'm arguing there is that we should shut down schools of politics and economics. And I'm arguing this because they are teaching theories which are evil, not just immoral, they're evil, and they're having evil consequences, such as what we're witnessing today. The people who run the markets can do absolutely nothing about the fact that over 1 million young people in Britain between 16 and 24, isn't it, are now out of work and can't get a job. They can't get it, and nobody can help them. But what is behind this startling fact is the factor of the theories which are being promoted in schools of economics for running economic systems. For example, one factor I'm attacking at its basic level is when they postulate. I remember when I went to the London School of Economics, the first thing I was taught is that the factors of production were land, labour and capital.
Oh, surely that's so. That's what I was taught.
Yeah. Well,
what's wrong with that?
I think you were taught not only nonsense, you were taught evil nonsense, because you are saying that man, human beings made in the image of God, are a factor of production. There's no more or less account than a cabbage patch or whatever, or a bag of money. And this seems to me at the root of the immorality of our present economic system, that we just cannot, we dare not, we ought not to dream of thinking of human beings as simply as a factor of production. By all means, they are useful in helping to produce. But ultimately, we are producing not because by using man as a factor of production, but because we want to achieve fulfillment of the human condition in human beings. And this seems to me a totally different objective. But then it's a moral objective. And then again, moral objectives can't be anchored onto anything except within communities where personal relationships are far more important than relationships of human beings with machines or with markets or with anything that's automatic.
But wouldn't those city bankers say to you that this is what you get when you've got a reverend father reading economics, and then you have the tension between the moral side and the economic theory? Surely that's all that's gone wrong. It's in terms of your own personal experiences rather than the world that we live in.
Not sure. I think it might be better if people started to argue the need for far more people doing theological training, far more budding reverends, to be taught the moral aspects of economics in ways that they could preach them. What has happened is that since economics has assumed a greater and greater power over in market terms, over the operation in society, it's creating a situation where morality is being sidelined for the supremacy of economic factors in themselves. And this, of course, is leading to a nosedive of where we are now. The whole market today is crashing around us. You can't argue today anything else about money except that it's out of control, it's running wild, it's running amok, because it's in such enormous sweeps, such enormous units, that nobody can control it for any purpose at all. It's running its own plan to get more and more of itself, but ultimately it reaches the end of the road because it's a finite world based on finite factors of production as well as anything else.
And at what point do you say, looking back, that we lost control? Because I think you conceded in the book that once upon a time economics was a moral science. At what point did we lose our way as far as economic theory and also the application of that theory?
Well, it was Professor Tawney, in his book Religion and the Rise of Capitalism, who pointed out the crucial change in the law that took place, that made usury legal in the 16th century, in the reign of First Elizabeth. The market by then was getting so strong that it was able to win its way, but people at the time, as Tawney pointed out, urged people to stop and think where this would lead to. It would lead to the market getting more and more powerful, and it would in time sideline the church. Instead of the church controlling the market would end up controlling the church. And that's exactly
is that what's happened? And is that what as we speak, they are young men and women camping in occupation at St Paul's Cathedral? Is that what it's about? Is that?
I think this is behind it. I think what impressed me, I've been to see those people.
Turning always until morning. Turning always until morning. Turning round.
If Jesus Christ was to come down and come down to us again and see those occupiers outside St Paul's churchyard, what would he be saying to them?
Well,
Would he approve of what they were doing?
Bearing in mind that the people he threw out of the temple were the moneylenders. It's worth remembering that. And that the two laws that he promoted, he said that your obligation to love God and to love your neighbour, on these two laws hang all the laws and the prophets. They were his words, or something like it. And the Christian religion was founded on that basis of the love of God and the love of your neighbour. But what I think the modern economic experience is doing is making neighbours strangers to each other. You can't love your neighbour if you haven't got one. And he said, I was accused some years ago when I urged that if people took goods from a family-owned shop in the village, that was immoral and illegal. But if they did the same thing in a giant supermarket, it might be illegal, but it was not immoral. And, but people couldn't see this distinction at all, and I was labelled the shoplifting vicar. And, but what I was stressing is that the shop in the village was a family business which was an intimate part of the social structure of the village itself, whereas the supermarket was a dagger being pointed at that structure and destroying it, which is it is doing.
Well, there you are, ladies and gentlemen. That's me, Deli Ogun, in conversation with Reverend John Papworth, the shoplifting vicar and the author of the book, Why Schools of Economics and Political Science Should Be Closed Down. Get out and get it.